You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG. Welcome to Master Diaries. This is a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about the recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss planning a ritual. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Matt, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Jody.
What's going on, everybody? Feeling good, feeling ready to go. Also highly frantic between game tonight and running at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, which is not usually a time I do things other than drink coffee.
A little coffee plus D20 fantasy role-playing. So let's get to it. Jody, today our episode focuses on a session that has been a long time coming for you, and yet is very much needing to be played on short notice. So that is confusing to me and the listeners, I'm sure. So why don't you take us to the table, my friend?
All right. For those of you who are longtime listeners, you know I've been running this series of micro campaigns based loosely in the setting of Saltmarsh. And unfortunately, my last one really stalled out. We were supposed to be done in November, well before the holidays set in, and alas, there was a scheduling snafu at one session, and then rescheduling. There were plagues involved and sicknesses and life, and then we got to the holidays, and I've played a whole separate session series in between.
Sure.
And I was about to actually pull the plug on the whole dang thing. And hey, dear players, let me ask you a few questions, and we're just going to write a narrative to here's what happened. But out of the blue, one of my players messaged the group and said, hey, what do we think about this particular day? Let's play. I'm available. Let's make it happen. And somehow, by me not asking, the stars then aligned and they were all available. So tomorrow morning, bright and early, I'm going to run the conclusion of this micro series. This is based loosely on Mistaken Identity and Shadows over Bogenhofen from the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game series of old. They traveled. There's a mistaken identity of one of the players looks identical to a dead body they find with an interesting little clue. They go into now Saltmarsh and experience the town and live there, only to find out that the body of the person who the character now seems to be is part of this evil cult that is carrying out a ritual. My dear players have found this all out, uncovered. Because they're just charming witches, two of the three of them are playing witches. They just talked their way into this very exclusive party in roundabout means through some excellent role play and alarmingly high charisma scores. And they're at the mansion where the ritual is going to happen. They're in the party. And that's kind of where we wrapped up last time. So they know the party is going to culminate with a very private, secluded ritual. For my fast start, they're going to be faced with the decision of PC, who is Mistaken Identity, can go join the ritual, can go be part of this group casting of the ritual, which would then split the party. So there's some good stakes there, and we dive in, and all we have to do is play through the party is breaking up, this giant party, and they're going to go down and face this ritual and hopefully stop it before, whatever horrible chaos, insanity ensues. So I have to run all this tomorrow morning, and I've got 8 million ideas, and I have a 3-ish hour session to run through this conclusion. So I want to bounce some ideas off you, Matt, and listeners, and just plan this darn thing in real time.
All right, Jody, let's gather around the fire and help you plan your session. You are now using the show as a mechanism for generating content. You gotta love it.
Yeah, I walked up to you this afternoon and was like, hey, you know what we should record? Help.
A conversation we would have had anyways.
Truly.
I have a couple questions for you. This is not going to come as a surprise, but my first one is pretty basic. It's not, I don't think we're going to get at the meat of this, but my first question is, this sounds a lot like a setup for a Call of Cthulhu game. There's I can't remember. This actually sounds like the setup to at least one module that I've heard probably Seth Skorkowski talk about on his YouTube channel. Little plug for Seth, because he is an excellent reviewer and discusser of RPGs. Highly recommended. Little free publicity for Seth Skorkowski. Everybody.
Yeah, because he needs it from us.
You know what? We're just trying to help out the little guy.
Yeah.
So Jody, this is giving me, and I don't know exactly the vibe of the module, but it's giving me Call of Cthulhu vibes, and I want you to tell me if that's where you want me to be, because that's where I'm starting from your description.
Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know, the original Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game is, and I've never thought this till right now, and it's probably the easiest way to explain it. Imagine a fantasy role-playing game and Call of Cthulhu smushed together, and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay cuts a middle line through those two. Yes, you have the elements of classic fantasy role-playing like Shadowdark, where you're going to do heroic things and wield a sword and hack and kill monsters, and the dark things in the world go bump in the night and want to steal your soul and eat your face and all those wonderful things. And then it leans heavily into a skill-based system and investigation therein. I mean, I have the strong opinion that when you get into skill-based percentile style systems like Call of Cthulhu and the various Chaosium systems, those naturally lend themselves a little better to investigation because of the granularity of skills that are presented and how you just interact mechanically with the world via your character sheet. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, that this is based on a module from, splits that difference. This play group in particular really enjoys talking to NPCs and spending time just being in the world, and I figured this would be a really good fit for them. It also was a really good fit for Witch class from the Cursed Scroll. And as I mentioned, there of the three players, the two of them are playing witches, and the third is playing a priest of what I call the old faith, using the Warhammer Pantheon, which is just kind of an agnostic Taoist worldview. So it all blends together really nicely and gives them access to why they would be socially interacting. So yeah, long story short, yes, very Cthulhu mystery-esque, and they are at the apex of the mystery in the mansion.
Interesting. And I want to ask you a bunch of questions about how this went, but we should save that because we're looking forward here. But I want to ask you how the investigation went and all that stuff. So we'll table that. I'm assuming it went well if a player asked to hold the session at just kind of out of the blue. But as far as planning this, you have 3 hours, and you got some players that really like to role play. You're going to start with this question of, do you split the party? I love that. Is there a set piece that you are hoping to get to? Like, I guess, if you're thinking about a module, is the end of this module a combat encounter more than likely?
Yes, but in keeping with that Call of Cthulhu lens of, if you can circumvent the fight, good call. But the culmination of this is the players are going to be at the dark ritual. They're going to see the ritual in progress. And in many ways, this is going to be the catalyst for future, much more open-ended sessions that I run. This event will hold a seed of a spark that will carry all the way through, which is actually something I've tried to do in each of these. Is there's a little teeny tiny seed that I know is a long-term narrative piece, but seeing the ritual get enacted is the culmination, and likely a fight. Likely they're going to want to kill the cultists and interact. Now, being that it's, again, two witches and a priest, that is not a let's draw steel and sword and board and blood and guts our way, hack our way through this. Diplomacy or shenanigans are going to be a more preferable approach. Their priest is their fighter, effectively, which is high stakes, because if the priest goes down, there goes the healing. So yes, it will be a combat encounter. Yes, it will be a set piece at the end. One of the really nice things about this module that I love is you see the end location before the end of this. They've been there before. They know where they've got to get to, Worst case scenario, they could pull the ripcord and try and run back through the town, get into the sewers, and literally use a back door to get into the place. But they're also in the mansion right above the place they would take this long circuitous backdoor route to get to. So it's an interesting choice. So yes, the set piece is go down to the dark ritual. We'll start actually in a set piece of the breaking of the big social party, and the cultists who they've identified through roleplay will begin to leave. The private executive suite members will be going off to do some scandalous chaos seedy stuff in the other room, adult ratings not on those rooms, and then some of the guests will just leave. So there will be a myriad of ways to dive into the scene, and that'll be my opener. And then what they choose to do from there is all roads ultimately lead down to this ritual, which again they're aware the ritual's happening. They know the timeline on the ritual. They know even where it's happening, but the only path they know of for sure to get there is a really long one out and about through town, as opposed to a literal gold ticket to just walk down and be a part of the ritual.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've got a pretty good skeleton. What is your where are you at right now in terms of needing to generate some content, or is it a I don't want to have to make 1,000 NPCs.
Right. Well, that's it, right? I've got my big concept. I've got, to use an old hankerin Fernail, I have my power word, right? My power words are ritual and opulent party. Bam. There. I keep those ideas. Dark ritual, opulent party. Dope. Got that. I have my opener and my closer. Great. But I got to get from opener to closer, and I need to do it in a way that's satisfying. I mean, I'm talking about the conclusion that these players, somewhat unbeknownst to me, have really been waiting for now for 2+ months to see this thing end. They want to know how this story ends. So, I feel a little bit of a hey, there has to be a good payoff here. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple things I have to plan. The big one, pacing. And I have a very tight pacing window here with a group who likes to talk and likes to meander, and both socially and in game. So what I figure right now that I'm building myself is, okay, I can have 3 set pieces, which gives me an hour per set piece scene. The opener I've got, the closer I've got. If I allow an hour for each one of those, that's 3 hours. And the final scene and the build up and resolution, and then having time for some closing exposition for these characters as well, because they're going to meddle with the state of things in Saltmarsh. This will have a pulse effect in the town. What that means, I don't know yet, but we'll see how they play it out. But it will have, on even a micro level, some lasting repercussions. So here's the idea I'm playing with that I wanted to float to you and go, what do you think and what are your ideas? We use the crawling clock often to count down. And I was thinking about the ritual and going, well, wait a minute. What if I used the crawling clock, which is a just D20, for those who don't know? It's a D20, and each round of dungeon exploration, we would roll a D6 usually, and then the D20 counts down. And when it gets to 0, bam, something happens. So my thinking is going, okay, opener, do you split the party? Yes or no? Resolve that scene, and then go, and we're starting the crawling clock. When the crawling clock hits 0, the ritual's done. The ritual triggers. It's going on. It's starting. And I can start playing that, and then not doing it by round, but doing it almost by story beats, which gives me a window somewhere between 1 and 20 rounds. Statistically, very unlikely that it would be 1. And I would actually remove that possibility, because I don't think I'd keep the exploding 6s just for number sanity.
Yeah.
So that was a thought I'm playing with. And you, I feel like, do handle pacing better than I do on a tight timeline. If you truncate down, you're I'm going to run for 2 hours. I'm always impressed with that you can get something meaningful done in 2 hours. If you give me 6 hours, I'll let my players and myself flounder around having a good old time for 3 of those hours before I go, oh yeah, there was a thing we needed to get done. Well, I only got 3 hours, so I can't do that. So I'm ooh, this is a danger zone for me as a GM. So I'm oh, what if I use the crawling clock and I'm transparent with them about there's no exploding 6s. So it's somewhere between 4 and 20 turns to get down and stop the ritual. And it creates that timer sense. Again, those of you who are familiar with Index Card RPG or the work of Runehammer, you'll know that the power of the timer and a sense of urgency. And it makes the ritual process tangible rather than there is this ritual maybe going on somewhere.
Yeah. So I have two immediate thoughts. My first thought is I like the idea of a timer. I think so. I'll pitch you an alternative.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I never like, and this is just a thing that I tend to do when thinking about rules and implementing them or homebrewing stuff. I never like having to have a rule excluded for a moment. So you talked about like not having the exploding sixes. For some reason, doing that makes me think like, well, is there a cleaner way to do this? To go like, we're going to use the crawling clock, but we're not going to use the sixes. It's like, that's a core feature for me, but maybe it's not for you. And
I
this
forget like half the time.
I never forget.
I know.
I never
I'm
forget.
impressed because every time I roll a 6, I'm like, do. All right. Wow, that was 6. That was bad. Then I keep going like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be even worse. Damn it.
Let me kind of combine those two things. So perhaps in order to create a ramp up in terms of your first scene, what if you played out the first scene with using the crawling clock as standard? And when that crawling clock hits 0, you put a hour-long timer out.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that hour-long timer is when the thing is done.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking out loud here, but the reason for that is it uses some mechanics from Shadow Dark, right? It uses the torch timer, but it uses it in a way that creates a sense of urgency. You know, maybe you don't have the crawling clock be the trigger. Maybe you have some other trigger. But I think it would be cool to, because you have 3 hours, and you talked about like there being an hour for this set piece, and you want to make it an hour. Well, it seems you have a mechanic that is an hour long,
right?
And we have hour-long sand timers that we use regularly, so we could keep it analog that way. I don't know. That's what popped in my head. Is a way to get to an analog torch timer, but it's a ritual timer, and it's visible, and it creates that creeping, crawling sense of dread as it runs out.
I like this idea a ton for all of the reasons you said, because it's such a clear timer. 2, can I mooch your giant red 1 hour?
Well, that's what I was thinking is I have these. So I bought these. Oh my gosh, there's a brief segue. I bought these giant red sand timers that are really cool. They are obnoxiously large. I thought they were going to be about half as large as they actually are, but they're made
would still be pretty big.
They would still be pretty big, but now I have them kind of as like set dressing in the back of the game room here. But yes, that was going to be my
very
thought
Wizard of Oz vibes,
very much, and that was going to be my thought. Was I just happen to have these things. You can just have one. I don't have space for 2. Take one.
Not at the table.
No, I don't have space for 2 anyways. But that was my thought when I bought them, opened them up, and realized, oh my God, these are huge. Was I'm going to use this one day for something that isn't a torch timer that has an hour-long mechanic. I really, hearkening back to when we played through Cry of the Stingbat, I really enjoyed the fact that there was a time limit on that session, that the session will end, the Stingbats will come, and you got to get out within, I think it was 4 hours, right?
Something like that.
I mean, that is really cool. I think you could do something similar. You could just set a timer for 3 hours, right? And then when that last hour hits, that's when you put out the thing.
Okay, so sticking with this torch timer idea as opposed to the crawling clock counting down all the way. The nice thing about the crawling clock counting down all the way is it's really clear for me when it would start and when it would end. Like those mechanically are very manageable. It also gives me the GM fiat of when do I throw a D6 at it?
Yeah.
Right. I can control that a little bit more. However, the aesthetic and emotional impact on player characters of the actual clock, can't argue that. In fact, leaning that way at the moment more heavily. My question is, do I need this is when that's going to start. I need a hard narrative beat.
Yeah.
So that would be my follow-up question is, okay, so somewhere I've got my opening scene where they're going to be talking to guests. Here's a last little nugget to continue to build the scene and as you and I call it, our dials and levers we can pull. So I have an NPC in my back pocket that's been lurking in the shadows that they've learned by meeting the little bit of a spoiler here part for you specifically, the Thieves Guild. They met the Thieves Guild in Saltmarsh. You didn't know there was one, but there is. And they met them.
I sort of assume that there's a Thieves Guild in any fantasy
in a town with a history of smuggling. It would be kind of weird if there weren't, frankly, but nevertheless.
Honestly, it's less of a spoiler. It'd be more of a spoiler if there weren't thieves.
There's no thieves in a smuggling town that has actual political tension over accepting their smuggling past.
Continue.
There is an assassin in town that is not aligned with the Thieves Guild, is an agent from outside, and they haven't talked to this person yet. They've seen them in the shadows. They chased him through a crowd, and we had a dice-off moment, and they weren't able to get a hold of the guy. He slipped off into the shadows, and they've seen him throughout the campaign. We're talking like 3-4 sessions now, but they've seen him a bunch of times. So I have him in my pocket, and I can have him as a break glass in case of danger moment. NPC show up, and I've already laid the groundwork of he's clearly capable and, able to handle his own. I have the NPC written up. I know who he is and what he's about. He may or may not be interested in killing the body double NPC in this adventure, but they're charming and witchy and they can talk people into things or just cast magic on them and make it seem like a good idea. So I have that lever or dial as well, that if I need it, it's in my back pocket. It's kind of my I need an out here because I'm on such a tight timeline. I like to have.
Yeah.
So that the only reason I load all that in is going, I don't need them, but I need a point when I go, rather than just saying, welp, it's 11 o'clock or it's noon, start the 1 hour timer.
Yeah.
Wub. That's kind of lame. I would want something more concrete to go, okay, how do I decide when the ritual actually starts? And I go, you have 1 hour. I'd like to have some ideas about what's the trigger there. So
do you want it to be a GM fiat, or do you want it to, because I can see the value, right, I can see the value in there being an opportunity for you to just call it, right? And I can see that would rub some people the wrong way, and that wouldn't be how they would run. But I think in this instance, if you're trying to get something done in 3 hours, and the linearity of this is known to the players, and so we're not dealing with any hidden nonsense here. They know what's happening. So I can see why you would want some GM fiat. However, I can also see, and I think for me, I will always lean more towards how can I make this random, but how can I make sure that the randomness serves the story instead of just being absolutely random. I like the idea of a crawling clock counting down and you not telling the players what it's counting down to and forcing them to understand the situation. Every round you roll a D6. Every round you roll a D4, right? Or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And when it hits 0, that's when the ritual starts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But if there's a moment, so the other thing is there a narrative moment that you can use to, for instance, is there someone that they know? Is there something about this house that they would be able to see a visual clue? If they, is there a way that you could signal it and then just drop it in? I don't know. Where are you at in terms of wanting the drop it in or the randomness or somewhere in between?
The funny thing is I don't have a dog in this race, which is a little bit weird for me. I think maybe for listeners, and something definitely about me, this is a part of my GMing that I definitely take from new school, 5e, modern fantasy roleplay. And my background of some Cthulhu time is I do tend to build my thought process around planning an adventure around scenes. That there are set piece scenes. So your question at the top was, you know me and you know what I do. So you knew exactly like, hey, tell me about the scenes you already have planned. And then it is learning from Sly Flourish, leaning into OSR, let player decisions connect those 2 beats or 3 beats or whatever it is, those scenes that I'm wanting. And then those are a little bit quantum ogre or moving targets, that I can move and change pieces so that there's a satisfying and natural and player discovered bridge, that it is player choice. It is genuine player autonomy, that they have the agency to meander between these points. In theory, I have an ending spot that I'd like things to end. And if I'm rolling as a GM and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, it will look as though that wasn't a fixed location.
Yeah.
And, sometimes my players have to give me the benefit of the doubt and go, we will go along with the adventure. Hopefully it doesn't feel that way too much. And I think I'm usually mostly skilled at connecting the pieces and having it feel organic. That's kind of like the GMing is losing invisibly over and over, that's that's one of those things. So it lands in there. So to answer that question, the getting from, do you split the party? And maybe that's the core problem, is their answer to that question so drastically changes everything that happens between them and the ritual that I can't. That's why I'm struggling. Is like I can't plan what gets in between.
Well, you need a contingency plan if they. Well, you need 2 plans basically.
Yeah, and the contingency plan is, if they say no, we're not going to be part of the ritual, most likely that's where I'll slide in this NPC I mentioned, and he comes in and he's like, "Hey, I know what's going on.
Yeah,
we got to get down there. I can get us in, but I can't do it by myself."
Yeah,
and if they split, then it's up to 2 of them to get into the ritual. Well, one of them gets to know, in the Cthulhu sense, they get to see the truth of the horror. They get to know. And one of them, I'm 90% sure, will not be able to say no to that cat.
Oh yeah, I know your players are. There's at least one person who's going to be like, "Yep, me, please. I'm all in."
She's the one. She. It was random, and the dice said she's the body double, so she gets to.
That particular player has the sort of I don't want to mention the prequel Star Wars movies necessarily, but she has the dice. The ability to change the face of the dice, much to the chagrin, but also joy of GMs.
Yeah, it was an extreme charisma check to get into the party. Like, she found legit, like, I didn't know it was going to happen, just found her way to some NPCs, that there was an opening at the party. It was a lot of random rolls, as you said, and she just kind of hand waved it and it happened. Yep. And, well, this is an extreme check. You have to have an invitation. How about a natural 20? Sounds like it's pretty easy, actually. It's a 24. Neat. Yeah, you can talk your way in and get those tickets.
So to think about these 2 plans, like if you have a player if you have this player who says, yes, I'd like to go to the ritual, then you have an in, right? And then you have some meta knowledge that is going to be out there too, which I know that a lot of GMs don't like. I love meta knowledge. Like, I love, because it demystifies the world in a way that I find to be useful. It answers questions that the players have and allows them to just sit back and go, okay, well, there's an answer to that. My character doesn't know it, but I know that this thing is happening. For instance, in our Dolmenwood game, I've given you guys a certain number of scenes that were specifically designed to either show you what was going on in another part of the wood, to either create a sense of urgency, but also to just give you a sense of place and a sense of that while you're not there, things are still moving along. One thing I was thinking, Jody, and I'm thinking about this as a way for you to get out of your comfort zone with pacing. One thing I was thinking about is you have your strong or your fast start, right? Could you write a short, dramatic cutscene? You have this opportunity to kind of personalize the ritual or personalize this scene in a way that will deliver some meta knowledge to your players. I don't know. I think that there's a way to, maybe after they make the decision, I'm thinking out loud again, but I think that there's an opportunity here for a cutscene that triggers the start of the ritual. I don't know. What are your thoughts on, because that's where my GMing goes, but then I oftentimes just improvise those in the moment, or improvise them with another player. I don't know that that's really going to fly at this particular table.
What meta knowledge are you thinking of? Again, if you just took this and you're like, okay, I have the premise, I'm going to go run this thing for a separate group of people and separate. What would be the meta knowledge that you would want delivered, or you just, if you suddenly jumped in as a player tomorrow, that you think would be helpful in catalyzing that? That's the jump I'm not making in this.
I don't know I'm not familiar with the adventure, but let me ask you a couple of questions just to give me some context. Is there a sacrifice?
Yeah.
Okay. Ritual sacrifice?
Yep.
Probably some sort of young person?
Yeah, they've met her.
Okay, so it's a young woman.
And there's some debate. One of the questions that will be answered to open the session is the leader of the ritual group has indicated that this new person they've met, this young person that the cult's kind of quickly adopted to be the sacrifice, is going to be the sacrifice. And they've given the PC the option to switch her out for the PC to stand in. But it's unclear if that's to then now stand in as the sacrifice, or if the young NPC they met will still be the sacrifice. So there's some stakes in that, and that'll all be revealed in the fast start as to how that is going to work. Yeah,
I mean, I guess in that sense, then you've kind of already solved the problem. But what I was thinking was, is there a way to like really either heighten the drama or give this particular NPC a little bit more kind of meat on the bone, so to speak, or you have this other NPC in your back pocket, this thief kind of character. Is there a way to give the players a sense that there is someone else here? Right, like we see this person creeping through the sewers, and they've already been to the sewers. They know there's this back way in. Maybe you see this guy creeping in through the sewers, and he's coming in the back way. And so suddenly they have this meta knowledge that there's this person who's eluded them, who is here coming through the sewers, and now they, as players, know that that's the case and are on the lookout. Their characters would already potentially have heightened, kind of already be in a heightened state. So it's not like those two things are going to conflict. They would still be on the lookout for lots of different things. So it's not weird for their characters to be on the lookout. This is the other thing I try and do with meta knowledge, is I try and make it make sense in the world. It makes sense that here they would be on the lookout for strange things or people that they know or what have you. So is there a way to shoehorn that in to give you some dramatic beats to play on later? I'm just thinking, because you and I both, I think, run, at least in some way, we've retained our 5th edition roots. I mean, my 5th edition roots, but your newer roots, right? Like, which you restarted running games in 5th edition. And I think that scenes are such a powerful way, even scenes that don't even feature the characters, which I know is like the cardinal sin of GMing, but I have found them to be useful in a way that maybe breaks, for a lot of people, verisimilitude or the kind of underpinnings and philosophy of the way they would run games. But that's what I'm thinking is if you need to, is there a way to, and maybe this is just a big cul-de-sac.
No, so I've got an idea that playing with this idea, let me know if this would work. So let's say if the player who can go into the ritual itself says, yes, I'm leaving the others. And then because the game then becomes the other two that aren't going into the ritual have to sneak out and get to the ritual and to get there so they can all fight this thing while the other one is getting to see what's happening in real time. So that's a fun game. Like that, I'm not worried about. That
I feel seems pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with that. What I have that I'm thinking might work the other way, which I hadn't considered till you just described this like cutscene thing. I like the idea of the assassin thief guy. Also, I will continue to ponder on that. That one's a bigger stretch, as you said, asking me to stretch what I do. That one's a bigger stretch, but I'm like, I get how that could work. I have the script of the ritual written up. So the actual things that are going to be said and done. And
cool.
That's the seed.
Very Cthulhu.
Yeah, that's the seed that will carry forward, and it'll tie together some stuff they've already done. And that's what it's that slow drip thing I like to do. And then sploosh, here's the end. What I could do is, if they elect to stay together and then take some other means to get into the lower levels, I could start reading the ritual to them anyway. Whereas my assumption had been, if the person's in the room, they'll just hear it. What I could do is stagger that out and then go, okay, you guys do this somewhere else in the mansion.
Yeah, that's cool.
The following is uttered.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you should do that. That's your answer.
Okay, and then use those as But see, now again I'm going, but then those are beats when I roll on the crawling clock, not the hour timer, which sucks because I think the hour timer is super sexy.
No, the hour timer is cool, but that's not why we're doing this. We're doing this to get to the best answer to the question, and that's the better answer. I mean that's a GM fiat thing, but I think what I love about that is it does the same thing. It like, sure, the consistent running of sand through a timer is a very cool. It's a very cool visual, and it is meant to be very transparent, and there's a lack of transparency here. But I sort of think with this group, and I guess that's actually an important thing to consider here, is that I'm funneling all this through the group that you're running for,
right,
and the style of play, right, that you have created here. This is absolutely not something we would do in one of our Sunday dungeon crawl games. Right?
No.
This is like a hyper narrative, very much
story driven
game. So all of this should be funneled through that kind of filter, right? But what I think is interesting about this is, first of all, it's going to stretch your, or I guess not stretch, but it is going to test your pacing muscles a little bit, because you're going to have to identify those moments. And if they get locked into a conversation, your tendency to just kind of like go back and forth is going to but again, I think one of the most powerful things you can do for a narrative and story-based kind of situation like this is interrupt the conversation to do that aside. So you're having this conversation, and then instead of responding in character as the NPC, your voice changes and you read another line of the ritual.
Right.
I think that for this group, I think that will work tremendously well for this group. And at first it will probably create a sense of what? And then 2 lines in, they'll go, oh.
Right.
And and then you'll have the cool reveal moment, but you don't want too much time to go past from when you introduce this thing to when they understand what's going on.
Okay. So here's what I'm seeing. I'm going to give you 2 versions.
Yep.
So, party says, yes, we're splitting up. Potential victim body double is going to the ritual. Then I'm going to play through the beats, doing the interrupting, because that's so natural of just, okay, you're at the party, you're at this, what do you do? Here's what you see. And the other players are now having to, almost chase scene, like get through this house that they've only seen a tiny fraction of, that they'll have to kind of piece together. How in the hell do we get down there? And, there's the game. So that works A-okay, fine. I don't even know if I need a crawling clock or anything. I might
no, because you're delivering the urgency in
real time.
In real time and in character and yeah.
So I might have a clock that just I'm ticking down by hand to show them.
Yeah.
Because I want something that's telegraphing, hey, this is reaching its apex in a very real sense. Option 2, they stay together. And then I'm just using this script that I've got, and I am going to use a crawling clock die. And it's the D6 and it's the usual thing. And I will still stick with the, I won't explode 6s because I forget that half the time anyway. But that it's as I'm reading through it, it's like, hey, this is counting down. And we're still taking through it. And maybe I I don't think I even need that anyway. And I can still use the timer at the end that once they get to the ritual room.
Yeah, then you just, boom, hit them.
Yeah, you've walked into the ritual room, and whether they're done or they have lines left in 1 hour, it's going down.
Yeah,
we're done.
Yeah, I sort of think you've arrived at what you need to do. So much of me just wants to now be a little fly on the wall to see how this works. We'll have to come back and talk about it. But I think what we can do at this point is take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and come back and talk about the process that we just went through and also how this process looks maybe in different situations, just to give folks a little bit more context. Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you by Pocket Money. Adventurers, are you tired of lugging around pouches bursting with clanking coins? Has the weight of all that gold, silver, and copper slowed you down in your dungeon delves recently? Well, say farewell to overburdened inventory slots and hello to Pocket Money. Pocket Money is the realm's most convenient solution to managing your treasure. With their patented coin compression enchantments, they condense all your wealth into a single compact slot in your inventory. Whether you're carrying the spoils of a dragon horde or just enough to pay for a pint at the tavern, Pocket Money ensures your purse is light and your bags are clutter-free. And here's the best part. Using Pocket Money frees up valuable inventory slots for more important things like healing potions, spell scrolls, or that cursed sword that you just can't bring yourself to drop. Now, right now, listeners of Dungeon Master Diaries can get 15% off their first moon subscription by using the code Dungeon Master Diaries when you sign up. So why keep clinking and clanking around the dungeon? Streamline your loot today and start adventuring smarter with Pocket Money, because every slot counts. Pocket Money. Carry less. Loot more. All right, Jody, so let's bring this topic into the light. And instead of some core takeaways, which we can still get to, but I wanted to make sure that we called out here at the end of the episode that this is not the way that we would prep just every single session of any single game. Because there's a lot in here that breaks the ethos of OSR games and breaks the kind of the way that I think a lot of people would assume that Shadow Dark playing GMs would prep. But I wanted to ask you, what about the way that you think through a session is different here than how you would think through a session of you're running Keep on the Borderlands still for our Sunday once a month games? I mean, talk to me about there's some pretty clear differences, but those are both modules, and I want you to give me a sense of, so you're not doing narrative story beats and scenes in the Sunday games, so what's the difference? And maybe there's some takeaways in here.
That's a challenging question because they're so different. It is a little bit apples and oranges. I think, not to be too much of a fanboy here, but this is why I love Shadow Dark so much, is it does both beautifully. It does both so well. So what's the both? Our Sunday sessions that are dungeon crawls, that are Diablo-esque, get in, get out, get the loot, level up, rinse, wash, repeat. Some high-level narrative, but at the end of the day, we want golden power. Those are so procedural. Yes, there are air quotes scenes, because each cave in the Caves of Chaos from Keep in the Borderlands are different, but there's some predictability, and there's also an amount of have content to get through scenes. All I am doing is linking room to room to room to room to room, because dungeon crawl. It is linear, even in its branches. So I need a working concept of, thankfully, the last few months, I've had groups that are really dedicated to going to the big cave and doing things there. So I've been able to dial that in. And then it does become more like the stuff we just did, because I go, where can I embellish? They've been there before. How do I enrich the story for the space they've already gone to? And then these skills that we just were flexing, meandering through, crutching along with, whatever version we just did, those skills become really useful in setting scenes within the procedural dungeon. But the procedural dungeon comes first. And I'm not bespoke serving characters' wants, whims, and desires. So that character piece is massively different. Of what will these characters like? What will I like? How does it fit into the town of Saltmarsh? How can I weave in some geopolitics of the region? Those aren't things I'm thinking about outside of one of these much more narrative games. So there's some crossover, and my hyper awareness of pacing is a byproduct of running those Sunday sessions, right? Like that's a very mechanical apple and orange difference, but it's one that's benefited the other. So there's cross play, but it's me having to do some mental gymnastics. And I assume that's the same is true for you in our Dolmenwood game where you're using Shadow Dark rules. You know, we're going down into a dungeon right now, or we are in a dungeon right now. And I would imagine there's dividends paid from our monthly, dungeon crawling game.
Yeah.
That running those very bespoke mechanical sessions. Do you see it that same way that I was describing of kind of apples and oranges and scenes and character focused versus procedural, or is your matrix different there?
I think it's kind of the same. However, I definitely regress to my own mean, I guess. I think given a long enough timeline, I will start to run a game that looks similar regardless of how Dolmenwood's a hex crawl. You guys spend a lot of your time outside of the dungeon. There isn't a crawling clock. There aren't dungeon rounds. There aren't crawling rounds for large portions of the game. Whereas our Sunday game is almost all crawling rounds and almost all crawling clock, and there's a lot of combat, and there's not a whole lot of role-playing. However, I think on a long enough timeline, all of those games start to look similar. My preparation for them is much different. I read the module, or I get a sense of what's going on, and then I just let it rip, because there's only so much that I feel like I can prep for. If I were prepping this session, I would probably just wing it. I would probably just at the table.
I'm about to play in your game in like 2 hours, and you just turned out all of the lights on the party with a big scary voice. That you aren't making me feel better right now.
I'm not. Well, I'm not. But that's the
other game.
Well, what I mean by wing it is I would have beats. I would know. You know where your A is. You know where your C is. It's just the B part that you got to get to. That's the part that I like finding at the table. Like I know what the beats are in this session that I'm going to run in a couple of hours. They are locked in my head. I don't know how they're going to happen or if they're going to happen. And all I do is I just improvise what's in between. And so we'll have a start that is basically set in stone. I have a handful of other things that I know I can deploy if X, Y, and Z. If the party makes this decision, then we're probably going to go in this direction or whatever. But in all honesty, I want to know from more GMs if this is the case, especially for OSR people who really prize not planning. They prize randomness, not fudging, right? To me, those are all just ways to convince ourselves that we aren't making all this crap up.
Right.
Like rolling out of the open doesn't mean that suddenly your game isn't on rails. Or
that you can't put your thumb on the scale.
Right. And I said this to you a long time ago, Jody, and I still believe it, that everybody fudges the game in their own unique way. Right? We all do it. It's just some people are better at hiding it than others, and some people will admit it and others won't.
Right. Yeah, you and I both harbor that we both roll in the open. Neither of us like having a screen. In fact, I think both of us are in the same boat of like playing behind a screen feels not weird. Good. Yeah, and we both can stick our thumb on the scales whenever we need to, and largely do it without our players noticing.
Yeah, and even when you're sitting at my table as a player and I'm sitting at your table as a player, I've never noticed. I never noticed when in our last campaign, you probably did it numerous times when we were playing N2, the Forest Oracle.
Best adventure ever.
But I would imagine that there were times in there where you put your thumb on the scale. Sometimes you were just very honest about it. But
when I evaporated you, that just happened. That was not thumbs on the scale.
But I think,
no, it's a good. I think a good point in all of this.
Yeah, so that's what I mean by wing it. I mean, I'm short of just making everything up, which is not satisfying, and short and also on the other side of the scale, having every single little itty bitty bit drawn up, which is also not satisfying. I think we're definitely somewhere in between.
And I think that's maybe something we can ask, as an actionable item, call to action for our listeners. But seriously, as Matt said, if you run a OSR in the platonic ideal sense, or that's what you're trying for, that it's random and it's here's the dungeon map and the world is the world and I'm just an impartial referee in the world. If that's your mindset, I'm really curious how this whole discussion about planning the ritual and the session I'm going to run tomorrow morning, how did that fall for you? Like, were you just sitting here and your skin was crawling the whole time? And you're like, what are these guys? I can't listen to them anymore. Or were you going like, oh, that's weird, or I thought they were better than this? I don't know. We're genuinely curious because there's so much made on the internet that tells us to be insecure about these things, right? That tells us as GMs, there's a one true wayism. And if this is your first time listening to us, that's one of the few things we will say absolutely is there is no one true wayism. That's our one true wayism. Do with that nonsense thought as you will.
This is Kelvin Ball.
Yes, it's all relative, my friends. So, yeah, I think that's an actionable item is where do you live in this? And I think if I had to now, listening to your explanation, put it succinctly, the difference is this session I'm about to run tomorrow morning is narrative driven. There is a plot, and I have a responsibility to hit an end beat for my players. They're expecting one. When we get together on Sundays to kill the monsters, get the loot, and level up, I have no obligation there, and I don't even think about it. I just run a space, and that's it. That's the end of the day story. So where are you at, listener? Where do you fall in this whole deal? Let us know, add us, and here's how you can do that. As the torchlight grows dim, we hope you're able to find something useful in this rambling discussion today that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, head over to the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadow Dark Discord channel. Look for links to any materials we referenced in this episode in that thread or on the show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can find Jody on the Shadow Dark Facebook page under the handle Pezman, and you can message Matt via Discord using the handle SC Matt. Until next time, do it your way, baby.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadow Dark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023.